I'm Matt Hodson, and I'm the course leader for the BA Honours in Music Production course here at Bimm in Brighton. So what have we got in front of us? I brought in my Eurorack modular synthesizer here. This is one of two cases that I have. And this has kind of been a bit of a resurgence. You've probably seen a lot of stuff online. Past 5 years, this has really grown. There's more and more people making these modules. And there's a bit of a scene about it at the moment, really. I think the thing for me about modular synthesizers is that it's just a completely different headset to working and making music and producing music. This does make it quite complicated to do things that you can do inside of a computer really, really quickly and really fast. But it's the part of the journey that makes you think completely different about how you're going to approach composition and production. It completely changes stuff. And I think that's just as important as just you know, the end product. This will inspire me to work in a particular way that perhaps working with a computer doesn't. I'm not here to bash computers either. I use computers all the time. In fact, I use this in conjunction with a computer a lot as well. So you can actually use this and send MIDI information from a computer into a modular synthesizer like this, and backwards as well. So it's completely compatible. I play live with a live drummer as well, so I play on stage and I've got this and I have a live drummer and it's all synchronized up that way. So I don't want you to think that these are kind of just robotic machines. Well, they are really, but you can breathe a bit of life into them. So let's do some patching. Let's get stuck in, let's make some noise. So, oscillators, let's start with an oscillator. Oscillator is essentially our starting point. It's the thing that's gonna make the sound. From that point on, we can then sculpt the sound however we want. So if I just take the output of an oscillator, and by the way, I'm using these are cables, just normal patch cables. So if I take the audio output of an oscillator, and I plug this straight into my mixer here, into channel 1, we should have a sound. There we go. So that's the output of an oscillator, and it will just do that all day long. I could just leave it here for 5 years, and it will do that. It'll do nothing else unless we start telling it to do other things. It's a bit boring. We can also change the octave. I can change the wave shape, so at the minute it's a sine wave, and we can add more harmonics by going to square, and then to triangles. Boring. It's just an oscillator. It's a nice sounding oscillator though. I mean, it's pretty crunchy, it's pretty nice. And for the price, you can't go wrong. So what can we do to sculpt a sound if we wanted to, say, remove harmonic content? What might we use for that? Any ideas? Sorry? Filter, 4,000 points to you. I have a filter right next to it. So I'm going to take the output of my oscillator instead, and I'm going to run this into a filter. Into the filter, out of the filter, we go again, and back into my mixer. And now I've got the ability to do that. Yeah, that's what we like. A bit of that. So this is subtractive synthesis, essentially. This allows me to add and remove harmonic content from the oscillator that we've got. I've got 3 of these filters, I've got 3 of these oscillators, so I could plug all of them into their own filters and have independent control of the filtering of the harmonic content. You can have a lot of fun with that. Just doing that all day long is great, isn't it? That's fine. Don't need anything else. Okay, it's not playing any notes, it's just playing one note. It's just, let's change that. So I'm going to use this sequencer over here, the Renee, and what this will allow me to do is send notes, just like you're playing on a keyboard, into the oscillator to start playing some pitches, essentially. So I'm going to take another cable, and I'm going to plug the output of this over here into the input of the oscillator. It's changed the note, and that's because I can now change the note over here. The sequencer outputs the note to tell the oscillator to play that note. It's the equivalent of finger to piano on a keyboard roll. Play that note, play that note, play that note. That's what this is telling it to do. Cool? With that in mind, let me just open the filter again. So I can change, you see that yellow light lit up on there, that dial, if I turn that, I'm increasing and decreasing some voltage, which in turn creates a note, creates a pitch. And I can change the note, can play this actually like a keyboard. Okay, now it's starting to sound a bit sort of like, oh, yeah, it's not really music, Matt. Yeah, okay, I'm going to get there. Don't worry about that. And the reason for that is because this sequencer is essentially just sending out any old notes. Doesn't matter what those dials are, it's just going, oh, I'm playing that frequency. It's not playing C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. It's not playing those 12 notes within the usual scale that we all know in the Western world. But we can make it do that, and we can start running that through something that makes it play particular notes and only particular notes. So to do that, I'm going to unpatch my sequencer here. It was going into the oscillator, and now I'm going to plug it into this thing called a quantizer. And the quantizer will quantize the voltages coming into it. So if a voltage comes into it and it'll go, oh, that's nearly at a C, it will make it jump to a C. And if it's near an E, it'll make it jump to an E. And that way now, we've got more. It's playing notes that we can all go, oh yeah, that works within the Western music world. And I can turn on and off the notes that it's allowed to play. So I can just say, play all of the black notes. Don't play any of the white ones. So it's only playing those in that scale now. I could set a scale on here. I could set a C major scale or a D sharp scale, you know, whatever. I can create a scale and confine it to those notes. What this is basically doing, imagine you've got someone playing at a piano and you're taking away some of the white and black keys and then saying, you can't play those, mate. You're only playing these keys now. That's what this is doing, basically. Now, it's still a bit boring, isn't it? And I'm not going to stand here doing this at a gig because I'm not very good at that. I need something to make that move on its own and start playing some notes. I need to send some time to it. These blue lights are sending out pulses, a clock, rhythmical clock. And I'm going to take one of those and put it into the input of the sequencer. And we now have a sequence. Happy days. And like anything, just add a bit of delay. And it suddenly sounds really cool. Oh yeah. That's how easy it is, folks. I'll turn it off. It's a secret weapon. There we go. I've got a sequencer, playing some notes, into an oscillator. I'm filtering that oscillator, and then it's going into my mixer. Easy peasy. That is essentially like, you get that going, happy days. You're there. There's more you can do with this sequencer. This sequencer goes up and down as well as left and right. We could take another clock, and I can actually patch that into another point on there. And now you can see the lights are going up and down and left and right. I can change these notes, come up with something that I think is quite interesting, and then leave it. There's no presets. That's it. What's cool about the Quantizer is that it'll allow you actually to send two signals out of it to two separate oscillators, have them playing things that are harmonically related, so a third or a fifth apart. So I've got output 2 of that scale. Let's go into my second oscillator, and I'll send my second oscillator again into a filter, just like the first one, and send that into the mixer, input 2. bit of the old delay. Yeah. Now we're cooking. We just need a kick drum. And you can get yourself a gig. Easy. Let's do something a bit different. Let's get a kick drum on the go. Let's try and make something a bit more sort of musical, a bit more usable, if you like. I'm going to use this sequencer down here. This is the Eloquencer sequencer. This sequencer actually has this and this built into it. It also has 8 outputs, which allows me to sequence 8 things from one device. So I can have 7 oscillators being played different notes, and I could have a kick drum on the 8th track or something like that. This is really cool to use. If I press play on it, you'll see it's also got its own clock inside there, so I don't need to send it anything from the flashing blue lights of joy here. It just goes. Let's sequence some more notes. Let me take the output, the first output, and plug that back into my oscillator. So oscillator back into the filter, and then back into my mixer here. It's not playing any notes. Let's just put some random notes in here. Works in a completely different way, but probably one that you might be more familiar with if you're using Logic or Pro Tools or whatever. This is basically a step sequencer like you would see in a computer. So I can choose what note is being played at a particular point. So let's go C and G. Something like that. Let's go to track 2 and send that now to a second oscillator. Track 2 into oscillator 2, out of oscillator 2 into a filter, same as the first one, out of the filter and into my second channel. Let's put some notes in there. I'm going to stay within the key of C to make sure everything's in tune. Let's go E and G and another note, so octave on the C. Now one of these is playing 3 steps, and one of them is playing 5 steps, so we've got something really interesting because we've got this kind of mashing up of timing. Now I'm a little bit fed up of opening and closing these filters, and there's things that can do that for me. So I think it's important when you're playing live with modular synths that you have some elements that you are going to be changing yourself. Definitely, you need that in there so you can respond to things that are happening musically. But you can also get this machine to work for you. So at the minute we've just been using CV to create notes. Let's use some gates to open and close the filter, essentially to do this for me. I'm going to get something to do that for me in time with whenever there's a note to do that. And I'm going to use this envelope here. I'm going to use a gate. There's now a signal coming out of that whenever there's a note. Plug that into my envelope here. You can see a flashing light whenever there's a note. And we can plug that into my filter. And now, whenever there's a note, it's opening and closing that filter really quickly for me. Just as if you was pressing a key on a piano really fast. Question. This is like an LFO, but it actually can do an LFO, so LFO mode. I can slow it up and down. Or it's in its envelope mode, which is its default mode. And I can make the notes longer and shorter now using this envelope. So if I change the decay, so that's the decay of the sound. It just rings out when it's fully open. It's how we create energy in tracks. Like a riser, that kind of thing. Let's do the same with the second oscillator. So again, I'm going to take a patch cable. I've got my second oscillator output. I'm using the gate out of B. Let's run that into the trigger of the second envelope. And let's patch the output of that into the second side of the filter. And let's get a bass line on. I've got 3 oscillators here, so I'm going to go into the third track here, and I'm going to send that to my bass oscillator. It does all the kind of low end stuff. And yeah, let's also trigger that. Let's run it through this. This is a different filter. This is called the Wasp filter, which allows me to filter things using it in the style of an old. Have you seen the Wasp filter, Wasp synthesizers before? Black and yellow ones. This is based on the filter that comes with that, basically. So I'm going to plug that into there, and then into my mixing desk. Into channel 3. There it is. Let's put some notes in for the bass. Let's just do some kind of like, there we go. But let's trigger it again. Let's get the pulses. I'm going to use the envelope. We've got the basis of a track now. We've got things in time, everything's playing within the same key. We can change the pitch of sounds using octaves. I can elongate the sounds. Just need a kick drum. Kick drum's easy. So this is essentially like a sampler. This is the sampler ER301 sound computer. In this, you can load up all sorts of interesting things. I've got a kick drum already loaded into here on a sample card. You just transfer the samples from your computer straight into this machine. You can put anything into it, drum loops, vocals, all sorts of crazy stuff, hi-hats. I've just got a kick drum in here, so I'm going to plug the output of that into another channel on my mixer so I can hear it. And let's go to track D, put in some 4 on the floor, and trigger the kick drum. So now if I turn everything up and I can bring in the kick drum, we've kind of got a track. Let's get some delay. We've got a track, we've got a kick drum, we've got 3 oscillators, everything's in tune. Now it's a case of, once you've got the technology under your belt and you kind of understand what you're doing here, then you've got to come up with the performance elements. If I'm going to go out and play live with this, which I do, I don't make music on this, record it to my computer and then go out and play with my computer anymore. I leave this patched up like this, I put the lid on, I turn up at a gig, I've got some sequences stored in there, and this is how I perform live. So I've got to now start thinking, right, what am I going to do? How am I going to build these tracks up? How am I going to start? So I can take things out. I could just start with the kick drum. And then I could introduce synthesizers. And I can change the length of each synthesizer. Build things up. So what I'm saying is, once you've got over the technical understanding, you've got to then be able to put the musical performance element back into what you're doing. You won't be able to just go out, press play, and that's it. You know what you're going to do? Stand here and have a cuppa for 45 minutes while you're playing your gig. You've got to get in and understand what you're going to do with these different machines. And I've bought these things on purpose because they allow me to do different things when I'm playing live, like pitch things up and down, change filters, bring things in out, mute things, change my kick drum, introduce hi-hats, and all of that basically. So there's two sides to this. One is performance. 5 minutes, cool. One is performance and one is understanding the technology. Do we have any other questions? Got two. One at the front first.
For the oscillator, are you able to define different waveforms on that before you play them, essentially? Or are they all sort of triangle waveforms?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can get a lot of different oscillators with different waveform shapes in it. This one is restricted to sine, sawtooth, and square wave. But there are a lot of oscillators out there that you can get that allows you to morph between them. You can do more wave shaping on it and come up with some really more harmonically rich waveforms that you can use, definitely. You can also get some digital oscillators. That one's analog, which actually has, you can then start getting into all your wavetable synthesis and all that kind of thing. Because I appreciate at this moment in time, it's quite basic sounding in terms of the output. So yeah, different oscillators can suddenly bring new ingredients to you. I had a question here, mate.
So let's say you're doing a gig and you come up with the next, I don't know, Chime by Orbital, the next big hit. It's improvised there on stage, and you need to recreate that exact sound. How do you go about doing that with such an analog surface?
Really good question, and something that I've had to do recently, being signed to Fat Cat Records recently. I've got a 12-inch record coming out. It's a double A side, and it's music made completely on this, and they were live jams. Actually, they were first live streamed on YouTube. That's where Fat Cat came along and said, I like that. Can we have that? Oh, and can you do some gigs as well? Yeah, sure. So how do I recreate that? The sequences are saved inside of this Eloquencer. So all of the notes, all of the timing is exactly the same as when I played it before. The only thing that's going to be different is that I might have a different oscillator or a different filter. And that's it, really. And I find that really exciting. I know that when I go out and play live, I know my songs in and out. I know the melodies. I know the timing. And I know what's going to happen and where the transitions are and how to build them up and bring them down. But what's exciting for me is that it's going to sound different from the record intentionally, because I might sell that oscillator next week and buy a new one in, and then suddenly I've got to use that. And that's fine with me. That's fine. I've performed with computers over the years for a long time, and as nice as it is to go out and perform your track and have it sound exactly like it did on the record from Ableton or however you're using it, for me, this is really interesting to turn up at a gig and kind of, I'm performing like it's so live, it's so happening now, and I'm responding to it. And the fact that it sounds a bit different from the record is a nice surprise for me too. It keeps it refreshing for me when I'm playing and listening back to it. It might not sound as good sometimes. It might sound better. There's a great website as well called Modular Grid that I use, which allows you to basically mock this up on the computer. You get your modules, you fit them in, and then you can figure out, oh, if I was to plug that into there and this into there, that's how I'm going to create this and how I'm going to create that. So you can start planning stuff before you start buying. We're out of time. Thank you so much. Has this been useful? Yeah? Okay, go spend a load of money and have fun. Thank you very much, everybody. Cheers.